It was the spring of 2017. I was flying out to Chicago for a job interview. It was around 11 p.m. and I was sitting in my gate at the San Francisco International Airport. A storm was raging outside. Rain pouring down the windows as everyone was bundled up on the seats and keeping to themselves. I was just scanning the rows of people in seats sleeping, on laptops or phones, and wearing earbuds before I noticed this one guy. He was sitting in the farthest corner of the gate by the corridor, with no one else sitting around him. He was not on his phone or wearing headphones like everyone else. He has this huge, crooked grin plastered on his face, and he's staring directly at me. He looked pretty average in terms of looks and what he was wearing, but that grin was so creepy, it was beginning to make me shit bricks. Naturally, I turned away and pretended I hadn't seen him, but the fact that he was staring at me made me continuously turn to eye him back without realizing. Eventually, they called our gate and I boarded the plane. I took my seat in the business class right by the window and went on my phone, checking Instagram and texting friends. I did not see the creepy man boarding. An hour later, we were up in the sky. Sometime through the flight, I got up to use the bathroom, and as I was finishing up in there, someone knocked on the door. I called out, "Occupied," but the person continued knocking repeatedly and aggressively. As I was washing my hands, I ignored it, hoping it would go away, but it didn't. So I opened the door to make some ballsy remark, but froze when I saw who was in front of me. It was that guy from the airport, still with that creepy grin plastered on his face. Quickly, I pushed past him and walked to my seat, not glancing behind me. The rest of my flight went normal except for the fact that I couldn't get him off my mind. As soon as we landed in Chicago, I was the first to get my suitcase down from the overhead luggage, and the first off of that airplane. I called an Uber as I walked to the airport parking lot. It was 12 p.m. in Chicago. The Uber came and I drove to my hotel, and as I checked into my room, I realized something horrible. My wallet was missing. I don't know where I could have left it, so I called the airport and asked them to search the plane. They did so and got back to me a few hours later saying they found nothing. I drove back to the airport and spent the whole rest of the day searching and turning up nothing. My only theories were I had somehow left it at San Francisco or it had been stolen. I was able to recover and spent 3 more days walletless in Chicago. But you know what? Here's the scary part. When I got back to San Francisco and drove to my house, I discovered something disturbing. My door was unlocked, and my entire house was trashed. Everything had been broken, and anything worth a slight amount of value had been taken. I checked my security footage and was able to identify the intruder as the grinning man from the airport who, sure enough, had my wallet and therefore my keys. I called the police, who found his fingerprints all over my house. The only scary thing was that the prints did not match anyone on record.
I was 16 when this happened to me, and it still haunts me to this day. My older brother's friend gave me work of house sitting his rather large house for 2 days, with the pay rate being $100 a night. For the sake of privacy reasons, let's call my brother's friend Nick. $200 was a lot for such a simple task as house sitting, and since I recently sold my PlayStation 3 to save up for a PlayStation 4, the job came as godsend. At around 6 p.m., Nick picked me up and drove me to his house, as it was getting dark out. Once we got there, he told me about the security cameras he had installed in and out of his home. But I didn't have any intentions of staring at any security monitor all night, as I had brought my laptop to pass the time. After some time had passed, I felt hungry and decided to grab something from the fridge. But as I got up to make my way down, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye from the monitor. I sat back down, closing my laptop and taking a closer look, noticing the movement coming from camera 4. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that it was a silhouette of what appeared to be a man standing outside the house. Within seconds of glancing away from the monitor, the man was gone. At that very moment, I heard glass shatter somewhere downstairs, causing me to immediately look at the cameras, noticing him crawling in through the basement window at an alarming rate. I started to panic, watching him climb the basement stairs with a knife clenched in his hand. I quickly locked the door to my room and dialed 911, explaining everything. I watched the monitor, terrified to see the man on the same floor as mine, desperately opening and closing the doors, looking for anyone to cross his path. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear his now slowed footsteps approach my door as he attempted to open it. Realizing I was in there, he began to shout and pound on the door aggressively, frightening me to the very core. As I sat there shaking, I heard sirens in the distance, steadily getting louder and louder. My fear quickly disappeared as I heard the man run towards the stairs, attempting to escape his fate, when I heard the front door slam open, accompanied by somebody yelling,
"Police, put your hands in the air."
Moments later, I walked downstairs and saw the intruder in a pair of handcuffs being escorted to the police cruiser. I thanked one of the officers and called Nick, explaining everything to him. After about 20 minutes, he picked me up and took me home. But I got no sleep that night. All I could think of was how lucky I was to be alive. And if the cops hadn't shown up when they did, I wouldn't be here to tell this story.
I was 11 years old at the time. It was a horrible event. I lived in Texas, but my family decided to go to California during the summer of 2015. It wasn't going to be a long time, so my family of 6, including me, stayed at my aunt's house. One night, my parents went to a party, and both of my brothers and I didn't want to go, so we stayed behind. My aunt's daughter stayed with us too. It was around 6 p.m. My parents said they were coming back around 2 a.m. Hearing that gave me goosebumps, since we were staying at a 2-story house. I've always been scared of 2-story houses for this reason. As soon as our parents left, we all decided to eat snacks. Well, we wanted to, but there weren't any. My cousin asked us if we wanted to go to the store with her. Since she was already 19, she could drive by herself. My brother said yes, but I told him I do want snacks, but I don't want to go. I thought that my brothers would want to stay behind too, since they were just 2 years older than me. But instead, they just said, okay. They all left without me. I was all alone. 15 minutes in, I was sitting on the couch playing on my iPad. Suddenly, I heard a sound coming from upstairs. I decided to check what it was, but as soon as I started to go up the stairs, a glass cup fell down the stairs. I ran to my uncle's room and hid inside the closet. After 2 minutes of hiding, the lights in the room started flashing. I could see it from the crack under the door. I wanted to text my brother, but I left the iPad on the couch. Soon after, I heard another sound from upstairs. Well, that's how I knew that whatever was doing all the scary stuff was definitely upstairs. I decided to run out of the house, and then try to ask the next door neighbors to let me into their house for a bit. But before I could, I checked the upstairs window when I got outside, and I saw a figure in one of the rooms. It was a clear image since it was barely 7 p.m. The figure was definitely the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I saw a woman with a black dress. She was pale and had dark eyes. It was as if she accidentally messed up her makeup and got black makeup all around her eyes. She also looked kind of like a nun. I stood there, watching her for like 10 seconds. And then I saw a car driving in from the side. I moved near the garage and the car came closer. It parked at the house. I realized it was my cousin with both of my brothers. I was relieved. They asked me why I was outside, and I said I wanted to take a picture of the house from outside. I didn't tell them the truth. They didn't realize I didn't have my iPad when I said this. Once we got inside the house, I followed them upstairs. I was obviously behind them since I was scared. Nothing happened the rest of the day until that night. It was 10 p.m. It was raining. I just wanted to see the thunder, so I moved the curtains to look out the window. A bit of light came in because of the lightning, and that's when I saw it again. The figure was in the neighbor's parkway, just staring at the house. I will never forget that night, no matter how hard I try. Sometimes, while I'm having fun, I'll stop and remember, and the thought always ruins my day. The thought that the woman from that night might always be out there looking for me.
I'm 30 years old, and this story took place when I was 13. My mother was a single mom, and she had to work 2 jobs. She worked at a grocery store in the morning and a bar at night. So I was home alone a lot, but it was okay because I was used to it. I could cook myself some dinner and walk back and forth to school. I was a pretty responsible kid for my age. One night, I was watching TV while eating ice cream, and someone knocked at the front door. I was wondering who it could be, as my friends never came out this late and my mom would always use her key to get in. I opened the door, and it was a man standing there with his hands in his pockets. I said, "Hello?" He replied, "Hello, young lady. Are your parents home?" Stupidly, I said, "No. My mom isn't home right now. You have to come back tomorrow." He then said with a surprised smile on his face, "Oh, you're all alone, huh?" I said, yeah, I am." He replied with, "Okay, young lady. Have a nice night. Don't get into any trouble." He then walked away and I closed the door. He seemed friendly, but also weird at the same time. He was a little funny looking though. He was balding and had 70s style glasses on, with a mustache and bags under his eyes like he never slept. About 10 minutes passed, and there was another knock at the door. I got up to answer it, but before I opened the door, something told me to put the chain on. I don't know why, but my gut told me to do that. It was strange because we really didn't use the chain, but I'm glad I did, because as soon as I opened the door, it was pushed open, but abruptly stopped by the chain. Before I could even say or do anything, I looked through the crack of the door to see the same man again, and he said in a startled voice, Oh, hey there. I just wanted to make sure you were okay," as he stuttered. It was like he knew he failed getting inside the house and tried to play off any suspicion by speaking quickly and making it seem like he didn't just obviously try coming into the house. I said, "I'm fine, thanks," and I shut the door. At that time, I didn't really understand the situation or the dangers of what just happened. But still, I was a bit freaked out and wanted my mom to come home soon. An hour went by, and I was still thinking about what happened, so I started to watch a movie, trying to keep my mind occupied, when I heard,
"Hey, let me in quick. I gotta tell you something."
This was the scariest situation I've ever been in my life. It was the man once again. He was talking through the letterbox. I shouted, "Leave me alone." The letterbox closed. Then the man started banging on the front door, screaming, "Let me in, you little shit," while slamming the front door handle up and down, trying to get in. I just stood back crying, praying he doesn't get in. He eventually gave up and left. My mom came home about 30 minutes later, just to find me crying, and I told her everything that happened. We told the police, but they never found this guy. I look back, and I think how grateful I am that I had the feeling to put the chain on the door. I hate to think what that man would have done if he had managed to get in.
One day I was showering. My sister came into the bathroom and said, "Don't open the curtains." She said that her friend was going to use the bathroom because she couldn't hold it any longer. I said, "Okay." I knew someone was there because I heard noises. Then I heard the door close, so I came out of the bathroom. I asked my sister which one of her friends came. She answered, "No one came over. What are you talking about?" I got chills and I started to freak out. About 2 months later, I was sleeping in my parents' room with my mom and dad because I was scared to sleep alone in my own room. I woke up in the middle of the night. I sat down on the bed and then I saw something truly horrifying. I saw a lady in all white standing near the bedroom door, just watching me. I screamed and my parents woke up. They asked me what happened, and I pointed at the lady that scared me. They asked me what I was talking about because there was no one there. I pointed toward its direction and said that there's a lady right there. My dad got up to turn on the lights. He walked right through the lady. As soon as he turned on the lights, the lady disappeared. We moved about 3 months later. When we were unpacking, I saw a picture of a lady. She looked familiar. When I remembered where I saw her, I got chills. It was the lady I saw when I woke up in the middle of the night. I asked my dad who was the lady in the picture. He told me she was my grandma. He also told me she died when he was 23 years old. My dad was now at the age of 41 when he told me. I got really scared after that. Now when I wake up in the middle of the night, I try my best to go straight back to sleep. I'm 21 years old now. This happened to my uncle when I was around 9 years old. My uncle was living in our house and was staying at our vacant guest room up on the second floor. He's my dad's cousin, so he was really close to our family. My uncle was a morning person. He would always get up at around 4 a.m., drink coffee, and run morning errands around the house. He also told us that he could see and feel ghosts because he has a third eye. And to give you a little background on our house, it was the very first house that was built on our street. We could sometimes feel something moving around our house, especially at night, but we never really paid attention to it. One morning, my uncle woke up at his usual time, around 4 a.m. He left his room, which was right beside the staircase, saw my older sister, who was 17 years old at that time, going up the stairs with a cup of coffee in her hand. The weird thing was, he said that my sister was looking down and not showing her face the whole time. He greeted her with, "Good morning, and why are you up so early?" He said my sister just kept walking up while looking down and ignoring him. My uncle felt awkward as my sister just walked past him. He ignored it, thinking my sister was in a really bad mood. He thought she probably stayed up late studying or something. My uncle went down to grab a cup of coffee when he saw my mother in the living room, ironing some clothes. My uncle was confused about why my mother was up at 4 a.m. and ironing clothes. He tried to talk to her and asked the same thing he asked my sister. "Why are you up so early?" He noticed that my mother was wearing the same clothes from the night before she went to bed, so he knew it was her. To his surprise, my mother ignored him. My mother never ignored anyone, which is why he found it strange. My mother was just looking down as she kept ironing. That's when my uncle knew something was off. He knew something was very wrong here. He rushed back upstairs to his room, locked the door, turned off the lights, and tried to go back to sleep. He tried to forget about it and woke up again a few hours later. It was around 10 a.m. in the morning when he talked to my mother and my sister about what happened. They said they were asleep the whole night, and they don't recall waking up at 4 a.m. My uncle was so shocked about what he had just experienced. Someone was copying my mother and sister earlier that morning. I was so scared at that time. I became so paranoid that I might feel or see something odd in our house, but I tried not to think about it too much. The night after that situation, My uncle woke up at around 3 a.m. He felt something at the end of his bed, and he saw a woman with long hair sitting there. My uncle froze for a while. He didn't know what to do. He was trembling when he said, "Go away!" My uncle hid under his blankets. After a few minutes, which felt like hours, he looked at the same spot where he saw the woman, and she was gone. My uncle slept with the lights on that night. After that experience, he thankfully didn't experience anything like it ever again. Back when I was 21 years old, I was a strategic firearms commander. This meant that I led a team into dangerous situations that oftentimes involves hostages or civilians who carried guns or other deadly weapons. I had a second-in-command firearms commander working beside me. His name was Callum, and he was my best friend. We always hung out outside of work. While on duty, he would always joke around and make us crack a smile, even when we were dealing with pretty distressful stuff. We once had a case where a man had possession of a firearm, and we were assigned to take care of it. Callum seemed particularly eager and jumped out of the van before it even came to a full stop. When the rest of the team reached the scene, the man was already shot. Callum still had the gun in his hand. Soon after, I asked Callum why he was so eager to do it. And then he said he had no specific reason. He was just excited. I believed him because he was my best friend. Later on, when I was looking at the man who was shot, I looked him up on social media and realized that he and Callum added each other on Facebook. Upon further investigation, I realized that there were thousands of messages sent between the two where Callum revealed sensitive information about several operations. I knew that he killed this man on purpose, but I had no way of proving it. He was taken to court and was sentenced to 3 years in jail for perverting the court of justice. I testified against him and was no longer his friend. When I was 24 years old, I was still on the firearms team. All that happened with Callum was behind me, and I was happy with my life. One night I went home really late after work. As I walked to my apartment, I realized that it was trashed. I called the police and they reported it, but there was not much they could do because I didn't have a CCTV. As I got into bed, I saw that there was a note on my bedside table. All it said was, "Remember me?" I instantly recognized Callum's handwriting. And now that he was out of prison, I thought that he would move on with his life. I was so wrong. This was his revenge. The next day, I went to the underground parking lot and I saw that my windscreen was smashed. It was clear that he wasn't over me testifying against him. Soon after, I also saw him near my apartment. I ran after him, but he ignored me and ran away. I tried calling his old number, but it was no longer in service. Then an envelope was sent through my door, and it contained hundreds of photos of me at work, home, and even out with my girlfriend at clubs and restaurants. These were all taken very recently. The last one, though, was a picture of Callum and I from years ago, and on the other side, written with a big red marker, were the words, "You're dead." I reported this as stalking and hoped he would end up back in prison. The police had gone to his listed address, but there was no one there. In fact, all of his bags were packed. I knew he was still in the area somewhere, though. One day I was by myself in an unmarked car, and I saw this Toyota Yaris, and it was driving close behind me. It was my gut instinct to get the plate number checked, and I was going to. But then I got a Priority 1 announcement on the radio saying there was a crazy man on a bus who had a knife and stabbed someone. I turned on my sirens and blue lights and headed to the accident. As I got on the bus, he was already arrested, and the ambulance was already there as well. As I was about to leave the bus, I heard a loud bang, and a man on the bus fell down. He was shot through the window by a man who was wearing a black hoodie. He immediately ran. I ran out of the bus and went to the boot of my car. I got my MP5 SF out, which was a large rifle with sniper capabilities. I ran after the suspect and radioed in. They gave me an order of critical shot, which meant I could shoot to kill the suspect. He ran through the town center and went to the left. I was worried about public safety as he had a large rifle as well. I realized instead of running after him, I needed to get on a roof and shoot down. I went to this building that had views of the right and left. It took me 5 minutes, and I was worried that he would have run away by now. As I got to the roof, I turned my gun to the sniper level. I used the eyepiece to scan, and I saw a man in a black hoodie running. I fired a shot, and he fell to the ground. By the time I got there, more armed policemen came to the area. I was shocked to see Callum. He was the one who followed me in the car behind me, and that shot in the bus was meant for me. But he missed. Callum was dead. I felt sad, but also relieved that this was all over. The man shot in the bus survived, and I was promoted for my diligent work. I'm still working in the force. It was April of 2007, and my birthday was approaching. Most of my family had already told me the gifts I would receive, like a new Wii along with video games for it. My grandmother didn't tell me anything. Now, my grandmother had always been a strange woman. She wasn't very talkative, but I liked to hear the stories she told. They were creepy, but intriguing. She told me she was going to give me a book. She didn't show it to me, nor did she tell me what it was about. Once my birthday rolled around, I was opening gifts from my loved ones. When I got to my grandmother's present, I opened it up and I saw a book with a pentagram carved into its front cover. I picked it up and thought nothing of it, because at the time, I didn't know what the shape was or what it meant. As soon as I grabbed it, though, everything went pitch black. When I woke up, my family was surrounding me, and my mom was scolding my grandmother about giving me the book. My grandmother looked at me, but her eyes were evil-looking. That night, when I went to bed, I was having a pretty good dream. But suddenly, something woke me up. I looked around and saw nothing. Then, suddenly, I saw a shadowy figure in the doorway looking at me. This wasn't a case of sleep paralysis because I was able to move, but that didn't comfort me because that meant it was real life. The figure crept closer and closer to me. When I looked closer at the figure, I saw gray hair and crooked teeth. That's when I knew it was my grandmother. I screamed and ran past her, but she grabbed me and tossed me back. I noticed she had something in her hand, but I couldn't tell what it was. I saw one of my toys that I had gotten a few years ago, picked it up and threw it at her. She fell to the ground and I ran past her, telling my parents. My parents called the police and they got there and arrested her. The thing she had in her hand was a knife, and she was planning on killing me. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if that toy wasn't lying there.
People call me Yaya. This happened to me when I was a young girl, maybe 7 or 8. It was a Saturday afternoon and my mother and I were at a mall shopping. We went from store to store, mostly for me. I was a spoiled kid. We went into a coat store, and I was pretty bored, so I would constantly walk away from my mother to play and stuff, as I did in every other store. My mother would always call my name, and I'd go running to her. This time, I was playing in a round coat rack. My mother called my name, and I ran out. I ran right into this older man. Then he grabbed me. He grabbed me by my wrist and asked me why I was running. I told him because I have to get to my mom. He then told me he could take me to her, but I said no, and he let go. It was weird because I saw this man in almost every store he went to, but he never had any bags. After that store, I had to use the bathroom really bad, so I went while my mother went to the food court. I sat down to use it for maybe a minute when someone else came in. The person walked right up to my stall. At this point, I was just looking at the person's shoes. They were men's shoes. I was confused of why a man would be in here. Before I could look up, the man said, "Hey, Yaya, everything okay in there? I'll come in if you want me to." It was the man from the stores. I looked up, and I could see his eyes peeking through the crack of the door. He then started shaking the stall. I began to scream. I've never been so afraid in my life. Then 2 women walked into the bathroom and the man took off. These women took me to my mother and told the police. They found him due to the cameras. I don't know what his intentions were, but the police said he probably would have kidnapped me. Who knows? From that time on, I would never leave my parents' side while in public.
When I was around 14 years old, I always went on the internet, and I had this app called Discord. After a while of having Discord, I met a boy named Luke. We started talking for a while, and one day, he asked me what I looked like. Without thinking, I sent him a picture of me. He told me that I was beautiful and that he loved my long dark hair and how I did my eyeliner. I just said thanks, thinking nothing of it. Around a week later, he told me that he loved me, and I felt the same way about him. We had so much in common. Luke was very good looking too. He had a different style from normal people. He wore a mask and always wore the color black. A while later, I realized it started becoming too much for me. He would always ask me personal questions like where I lived, and I told him I lived in California. He also lived in California and said he wanted to run away and meet me. He said that our relationship was going to get real. We kept talking every day, and he got so overprotective and would text me every few minutes. One day, I was home alone because my parents were on a trip to celebrate their 20th anniversary. I didn't mind until it became nighttime. It was so dark outside, and it gave me the chills. I decided to close all the windows and make sure that the doors were locked. I sat in my living room and watched some TV. After around 20 minutes, I heard a knocking sound coming from the window behind me. I realized I didn't pull the blinds over it and that some kids were probably playing tricks on me. I got up and went to the window. As I got closer, my heart kept beating faster and faster. I looked out the window and no one was there. So I just closed it with the blinds and sat back down. After that, I got a message from Luke. He said, "Let's meet up now." I told him I was busy and that I couldn't, but he said that I wasn't and that he could see me. I felt so afraid and told him to stop scaring me because I was home alone, which I really shouldn't have told him. I asked him how he knew where I lived, and he told me that he looked on Snapchat and found my exact location so he could meet up with me whenever he wanted. I was so afraid. I heard a knock on the door, and a teen boy's voice tell me to open the door. It sounded so attractive, and I knew that it had to be Luke. I stayed still and didn't know what to do. I was home alone, and no one could defend me when I'm alone. I texted him and told him to leave me alone now. Luke knocked again and said he wasn't going to leave. I finally got up and opened the door. There he was, standing there, ever so tall. He smiled and bit his lip and invited himself in. I told him several times to leave, but he didn't listen. Then he went quiet, and I tapped his back. He ripped his mask off to reveal all the scars he had around his lips. I froze in shock and told him to please leave, now. I was so angry, I didn't even care. Then he smiled creepily and ran downstairs to the kitchen, and I ran after him. He was holding a knife and then ran after me. I ran outside, hid in the bushes, and called 911 as fast as I could. The police arrived quickly. They found him. But what was even more creepy was that he smirked at me when they took him into their car. I called my parents shortly after and told them everything, and they came home. I never want to stay home alone again. It creeps me out. I deleted Discord and blocked him before I did. Having an internet boyfriend will haunt me forever, and I will never forget the creepy smirk he gave me.
This happened to me in 1970s. To be exact, it was November 23rd, 1971. I was 20 years old at the time and was really down on my luck. I was living in Portland, but I'm from Seattle, and I'll be going home very soon. I had lost my job and was about to be evicted from my apartment because I couldn't pay the rent. I will be flying back home to stay with my parents until I could find a new job or somehow get the money for my apartment, which would be very unlikely. I had one night left in my apartment before leaving. I didn't feel like staying home, so I decided to go for a walk and have a drink in a bar. On my way to the bar, I stopped at a convenience store and purchased a lottery ticket. I walked down the street and entered a nearby bar, where I ordered myself a beer. Not long after that, a man came inside and sat next to me and ordered a drink. We got to talking about life and just general conversation when he mentioned he was going to a flight the next day to Seattle. I laughed and asked him, "Wait, flight 305? He laughed and said, "Yeah, that's the one." He asked me why I was heading there. I told him I had money troubles, and coincidentally, he said the same thing. He seemed like a nice guy. We talked for about another hour before he decided to call it a night. Unfortunately, I never caught his name. I was about to leave the bar myself shortly after that when I heard over the TV that the lottery numbers would be announced. I decided to stay and check if I had won. Why not? And would you believe it? I won $15,000. Of course, I was beyond belief with shock. And of course, I wouldn't need to go back home because I had money now. The next day, I saw something on the news that a flight had been hijacked and the plane was being held at ransom. It was the same flight I was going to be on. And I couldn't believe it, but the sketch of the guy they described who took the flight hostage was the exact same man I had been talking to in the bar. He used the name D.B. Cooper. If you didn't know, he threatened to explode the plane with a bomb unless he got $200,000, which he did, then jumped out of the plane with the money and parachute and was never seen again. I didn't know why, but I never said anything to anyone. Even if I could, it's not like I knew his real name. It was such a scary coincidence that the only thing that stopped me was the reason why I was in that predicament anyway. I needed money, and then I got some. It's strange how everything works out in life.
Hi, my name is Alyssa, and I'm 15. A few months ago, something strange happened to me. To this day, I can't explain exactly what happened. I was relaxing at my house, doing some schoolwork on my laptop. Being home alone never bothered me until then. After about 2 hours of being alone, I decided to go get some ice cream from the freezer. As I headed back with ice cream to my room, I heard someone bang on the front door. I never answer the doors, and I always make sure they're locked when my parents leave. I decided it was the mailman, and that he would set the package down and leave. Then I heard the bang again, but louder. I was confused, so I went to my dad's office since it had a window facing the front porch. The second I grabbed the door handle of his office, my parents' bedroom door slammed shut right next to me. I screamed. Our air conditioning was broken at the time, so there was no way it could have been the air. I looked at the door, ran to the other side of the house, and called my mom to see if she was expecting anyone over. "No, Alyssa," she said. And those 2 words made my heart beat faster than it ever has. My phone disconnected, and I started hearing footsteps coming towards me from down the hallway. I ran and hid behind a door in our living room. I knew I'd be out of sight, since I used to hide there as a child. I called my close friend Emily, who always knew how to calm me down in crazy situations. She told me to go and lock myself in my room. As she was talking, I started to hear doors open and slam shut along with footsteps, and the voice of a little girl saying, "I'm going to find you," over and over. I started crying, and when the noise stopped, I ran to my bedroom door. When I grabbed the handle, and was about to go in, I heard it again. The little girl was in my room and said, "Come here, Alyssa. I want to play. Come here." I ran to the guest bathroom and locked myself in. I started to hear knocking on the bathroom door and the voice, "Don't you want to play, Alyssa? We could have a lot of fun." I started screaming back, "Hell no, just leave me alone." She started laughing. The knocking and laughter grew louder and louder, and then it started sounding like that thing, started to walk away, still laughing and knocking. Then I couldn't hear it anymore. My grandpa came into the house yelling, "Alyssa, it's Grandpa. You can come out, you're safe." I ran as fast as I could to my grandpa. Later on, I found out that after my phone cut out on my mom, she sent my grandpa to check on me. Once I told my grandpa that a little girl had gotten into the house, we went around the house searching for her, but we never found anything. All the windows and the doors were locked. The garage was closed up tight, and nothing was broken into. I hate being home alone now, and being in my room, but I've learned to deal.
This happened a little over 20 years ago. I was 10 years old and my sister was 6. We grew up in a small town, raised only by our hardworking mother. It started when school was nearly finished for the year. The nights were late because my sister was up all night crying about a witch. Anyway, my mother started receiving odd calls once in a while at work.
I need one of your children.
Mom figures it was some stupid prank and ignored it. But then she started receiving calls daily. Eventually, she was receiving a call most nights at our home. She reported it to the police, and they said whoever was calling was using random payphones. There wasn't much they could do about it. So she had both her work and home number changed. One night around 10 or so, there was a frantic knock on our door. Mom looked out through the window and saw a lady with long hair in her 60s. Not knowing her, Mom went near the locked door and asked what she wanted. The lady asked if she could come inside because she was in a car accident. Mom said she would call the police for her and told her to wait outside. There was a pause.
No, don't call the cops.
Mom thought this was strange and started walking to the phone. Immediately again, a banging on the door. Mom ran to the phone and looked out the window to see the lady staring at her. She coldly said,
Dorothy Margaret, I want one of your children. Dorothy Margaret, I want one of your children.
She kept repeating it until Mom noticed flashing lights of police approaching, and she left. The police searched everywhere and kept a car outside each night for a week. Nothing. A few weeks later, summer finally started and my sister wasn't having the nightmares anymore about the witch. We were at one of my baseball games and my mother was talking to a teacher at my sister's school and telling her what happened. The teacher said,
Oh, it sounds like your stepmother.
Mom looked back confused and said she doesn't have a stepmother. The teacher's face turned white. A while ago, a lady in her 60s would come watch the children play at lunch. She said she was my mother's stepmom and liked to watch my sister at lunch. She reported it again to the police and they checked camera footage. Sure enough, on a faraway park bench, there was an old lady most lunchtimes. They noticed she was always coming from the woods, so the police did a search and found an old shanty shack type of place. It had old blankets and a fire pit, and it had pictures she had drawn of us. That was the last time we ever heard of her. When summer was ending, my sister started having the nightmares of the witch again. Mom asked why she was getting scared again, and she said,
Because she comes to school and watches us.
the witch was the old lady.
I met a terrible creep at a McDonald's restaurant. I was running errands with my husband one day when I was 6 months pregnant. The day started out normal as we took the subway together. All of a sudden, I felt nauseous and I could feel that I had to vomit immediately. I quickly gave my bag to my husband and told him I had to run to the nearest bathroom. I bolted away at the next stop as I could not hold it in any longer. As I exited the underground, I ran into the nearest restaurant, a McDonald's. I hurried to the bathroom, where I passed a middle-aged man who was standing at the entrance of the bathroom. I paid no attention and pushed past him to get in. As I finally arrived to the bathroom, I immediately started puking. I never felt so sick my entire life. That's when the door handle of the bathroom started moving. I quickly pushed the door to keep it closed and yelled that it was busy, but the person on the other side pushed back. As that person managed to push harder, I saw the guy that was at the entrance. He had curly hair. I freaked out and slammed the door shut and started yelling for help. The man was insistent and kept trying to get in. I started puking again, so I was left with trying to hold the door with my foot as he kept banging it harder and harder. I continued yelling in the direction of the window of the stall as I heard people saying that there was a girl who needed help. Suddenly, the guy stopped banging the door and everything got quiet. I tried to calm myself down while still holding the door shut just in case. Then, I saw curly hair and a hand trying to get me from under the door, which had a pretty large gap. I started screaming again as I started kicking his face. At this point, I was desperate. I had no phone, no bag, and my husband was probably roaming the city looking for me. Then, I heard a man yell, and the creep suddenly getting away quickly. I kept the door shut when I heard a male voice telling me to come out and that it was okay. I reluctantly opened the door to find the manager of the McDonald's confused and shocked. I told him what happened and he called the police. With all the commotion, my husband finally found me. When the police arrived, I gave the police a description, but they never found the guy.
It was the summer before 9th grade. I was at my friend's family pool party, and there were tons of people there. At one point, while my friend, let's call her Lily, went to get some sodas for us, a man came up to me. I didn't recognize him, but since it was my friend's party, it made sense for me to not know everyone there. He smiled at me. He looked as though he hadn't shaved in days, and his eyes never looked quite directly at me. I stepped backwards, feeling uncomfortable. "Hello," he said. Hi," I replied. "What's your name?" he asked. I supposed that a first name wouldn't hurt, seeing as we were surrounded by tons of people in my friend's backyard. I'm Carly," I said. "What's yours?" "Rick," he replied smoothly. "Are you having fun with Lily?" Some of my discomfort eased. "I'm her parents' friend," he continued, stepping closer to my face. His eyes weren't focused, and his breath smelled like alcohol, even though it was early in the day. I grew even more uncomfortable and stepped away, waving goodbye awkwardly. When I turned around, he was gone. I told Lily about this, and she mentioned it to her parents. Her parents said that they didn't know Rick, which kind of freaked me out. But they told me that it could have been one of their friends who brought him over. So I shrugged it off and assumed everything was fine. After the party ended, Lily and I were having a sleepover at her house. Her parents had gone over to visit her elder sister to take some leftovers to her since she had not been feeling well and couldn't attend the party. So we were home alone with her elder brother. Lily and I were playing a game in her bedroom when her dad called her. He asked her to please go and turn off the pool lights since he had forgotten. Lily agreed and we stepped outside into the backyard. I waited on the back porch, reading a text from another friend while she went to turn off the lights. Once she was finished, we stepped back inside, locking the door, and went back upstairs to continue playing our game. At one point, Lily asked me to make sure the curtains were closed properly, and when I did, I happened to look outside, and I noticed that all the pool lights were on again. "Lily?" I asked, getting a strange feeling. "You turned off the pool lights, right?" "Yeah, I did," she replied, coming to look. Now there was a figure swimming laps in the pool, even though we couldn't see his face. It's probably just Cody," Lily replied, speaking of her brother. "Come on, let's go scare him." We walked down to the pool and slid open the back door. Waiting behind the bushes, we could see the top of his head bobbing in the water. We were going to jump out and scare him at any moment. But then I looked up at one of the windows of the house. The curtains were open. Suddenly, I saw the face of Cody illuminated as he turned on his bedroom lights. I grasped Lily's arm, and we both knew the person in the pool was not, in fact, Cody. We hadn't brought our phones with us in case we would get wet, and if we ran back around, there was a chance the stranger could see us before we got back to the house. We tried to wave to Cody, but he couldn't see us. Suddenly, splashing in the pool stopped. My heart dropped and I could hear each of my panicked heartbeats. A hand suddenly gripped my arm and flung me forward, and I screamed, and Lily did as well. I looked up, and there was Rick. His facial expression I will never forget. I've never seen someone with such a creepy smile. I yelled, and soon my mouth was filled with water as he chucked me in the pool, and he actually held me underwater. I choked for breath and realized he had grabbed Lily's arm as well, although she wasn't in the water. He was strong and clearly ill. He yelled, "Time to swim!" Somehow Lily managed to kick him in the face hard enough to run away, slamming the door behind her. He continued to hold me, laughing as I flailed for breath. Just as I felt I was about to die, police sirens were heard on the surface. He picked me up and threw me on the ground, breaking my arm. He ran away. The police came and questioned me, but he was never found. I will never forget that moment. I thought I was truly going to die. Nor will I forget those creepy, unfocused eyes. From then on, I've been terrified to be outside at night, especially in a pool.
This fact happened when I was 15 years old, beginning of last year, 2018, when I finally got to sophomore year here in Brazil. It was an ordinary Friday night. Suddenly, I felt a little bit hungry, so I decided to put on some clothes and go to the snack bar. It was barely 10 minutes from my house. I usually pass through the alley to go to the snack bar, but that time, everything was so creepy in there. When I was halfway there, it was dark, empty, abnormally cold and gloomy. I felt slightly intimidated, but there was nothing there that could really harm me. So I decided to just go through that alley. Then I thought, nothing's gonna happen. I kept going until I suddenly heard something weird on the other side of the alley. There was a man in there, staring at the walls in hunchback stance, grunting weirdly. And I found that incredibly creepy, but I was nearly at the snack bar, so all I needed was just to get out of that alley. Walk 1 minute more and I finally would get there, instead of making it all the way home with empty hands. Thus, I decided to ignore him and pass through after all. I finally passed through him. He turned to me and stared at me with a creepy smile, which made me walk a little bit faster, trying to avoid him. Then, suddenly, I heard a grunt and quick steps behind me. When I looked back, it was him. We were barely 2 feet away from each other. He had a kitchen knife in his right hand and jumped on me with amazing speed and tried to stab me. I managed to grab both of his arms before he could get me. However, since he was charging at me, he still had more energy to push me back and force me against the wall. I was terrified with all of that. I knew I would die if I didn't fight back. Back then, I was already trained in some martial arts to defend myself, but that I thought I'd never need to use that skill to defend my life until now. So, in a sudden burst of adrenaline, I managed to twist the wrist which he was holding the knife, kicking his stomach and punching him mercilessly in the face several times. In the end, his face was bleeding so much, but his body was ignoring the pain of the blows in his body and only focusing on killing me. Finally, I used a training that I took before to twist both of his wrists and elbows harshly at the same time, forced in 2 different directions, and kicked the backside of his leg, putting him to the ground until ultimately he could drop the knife. It wasn't easy because he was struggling and punching my back and somehow trying to jump on me. But since I had his arm under my grasp, he couldn't do much without breaking himself. I slammed his head in the concrete ground, stunning him, then kept striking his face desperately while kneeling over his arm so he wouldn't be able to react or reach his knife again. And finally, he was out cold, bleeding a lot. My knuckles were full of blood and hurt. So I got up, took his knife, throwing it far away from there, and ran away from him. I finally got to the snack bar, washed my hands in there, and did everything I had to do before going back home. But obviously, I didn't take the same path as I did before. But there were things that got much creepier. That was at the entrance of my apartment, where I heard screams coming from the other side of the street. It was the same crazy man. Now, seeming like he was possessed by a demon, and he was slamming his head on the iron door of my building's entrance. His face was horribly deformed and scarred from our fight. That freaked me out completely. My parents were on a trip and the watchman of our building was on vacation. I wasn't going to fight that man again, so I decided to rush to my girlfriend's house. When I got there, she was home alone. She looked worried because I was looking pale and there were still some marks of the man's blood on my clothes. I explained everything to her, and we called the police to come by my building. And when they arrived, the man was still in the entrance trying to force the doors unsuccessfully. When he saw the police, he attacked them, but got quickly dominated by the cops. They explained that he was probably a crazy psycho in the streets looking for prey to rape, kill, or do anything he wanted to the person. So they sent him to a high-security mental asylum for criminals far away from my house. I feel so lucky that I survived that day, and I'm hoping that I will never see that man again. My name is Sam. It was August of 2001. I was 15 and accompanying my dad to visit his friend's new house. My dad's friend, who we call Rick, just moved into this house a few weeks ago. My dad wanted to visit and ask about renovation and decorating the place, as it was pretty old. Well, I'm English, so that means my country is full of old houses, from like the 1500s. Rick had bought an antique castle thing in a forest. I know, pretty creepy, right? Anyway, we arrived and Rick and his wife invited us in. My dad and Rick soon went off to the garage to discuss what plans were for that room. I was left alone with Georgina, Rick's wife, and their newborn baby, Rick Jr. Georgina asked me to fetch some formula from the kitchen for little Ricky. Being the good 15-year-old boy, I agreed, even if the house was home to demons. I went into the kitchen and the first thing I noticed was a trap door in the corner. Me, being curious, I opened it. A terrible smell filled the kitchen. It smelled like horse manure mixed with puke. Suddenly, a pale hand with long fingers grabbed me. I swore and started hitting the hand. Another hand grabbed my other hand and tried to drag me down. I shouted for my dad. Suddenly, purple eyes appeared from the darkness of the trap door. They stared at me. My dad rushed in, and the hands disappeared. I had scratches on my arm, and so I ran them under some cold water. My dad asked me what had happened. I said there was some demon guy in the cellar. My dad and Rick grabbed flashlights and searched the basement. Nothing was there. We called the cops who searched the property, and of course, they found nothing. When I got home, I went straight to my computer. It turns out a man was shot in a hunting accident there, roughly around 1770. But trust me, those hands weren't of a man. Rick still lives there, and over the past 18 years, there have been countless sightings and weird stuff. I just hope whoever or whatever that thing is goes away. It was on Friday night. I was finishing the last deliveries that I worked for. I was headed to the bar that I would usually go to every night to grab a glass of wine. I noticed there was a new bar that had recently opened, a kilometer away from the usual bar, so I decided to try it out. When I arrived and pushed the entrance door, I noticed something very weird. There were only 5 people inside, and they were all dressed in Halloween costumes, like vampire, ghost, werewolf, witch, and black magician. I felt really uncomfortable because I was the only ordinary person there, and also because Halloween was over 2 days ago. I was still awkwardly standing there blocking the entrance when all of a sudden, all the people started staring at me as if I had done something terribly wrong. I made my move and walked over to the bartender. The bartender looked almost like a real executioner. He asked me rudely in a gruff voice, "What do you want to sacrifice, blood or flesh?" Well, that creeped the hell out of me, but I thought this was his way of taking a Halloween order of alcohol. So I requested to him, "1 glass of blood, please." He turned around, grabbed a wine bottle, and poured it into a wine glass. Later, he opened a drawer and took out a black satanic pentagram necklace. He dipped the necklace 3 times while muttering something into my drink. To my surprise, the wine turned black in color, and he placed the glass on the table and told me to drink it in 1 shot. I was really thirsty at that moment, so I took the glass and drank it completely. It was quite strong, and my vision was slowly starting to blur. I paid the bartender and left the bar immediately. While I was walking, I started to feel dizzy, and my vision was worsening. I wasn't focused on where I was going, as my mind was in a vision of all the faces of all the people I saw in that bar, maniacally laughing and giggling at me. All of a sudden, I had already arrived home during my vision. At first, I was relieved. But when I closed the door behind me and turned around, I knew that I was in the wrong house. It was completely abandoned, cold, gloomy, and barely lit with the rays of moonlight. I tried to open the door, but it was totally locked. Right when I was going to run into the door to break it, I heard the upper wooden ceiling was creaking, as if someone was up there walking slowly, step by step. I was really afraid as I had no weapon to protect myself. I tried to call 911, but had no reachable service to call. My only option was to go upstairs and find my way out. I carefully walked upstairs and reached the top. To my left was a dead end, but to my right, I saw a hallway with 3 doors on each side. I opened the doors one by one to find nothing but dark, empty rooms and no way to escape. Finally, when I opened the 6th door, I saw a pentagram was drawn on the floor with 5 candles around, touching all 5 corners of the star. This sent me back to where the bartender dipped a necklace with the same symbol into my drink, and there was a figure floating vertically right above the symbol below. But the light provided by the candles was not enough for me to figure out what was floating. Accidentally, I dropped my phone on the old wooden floor, which created a loud sound. The figure was slowly advancing to my direction. I quickly backed off and hit my head against the wall behind. That figure, I can't forget it. My body was completely paralyzed when I saw that the same bartender at the bar was this guy. He was still dressed as an executioner and faced my powerless body. To make matters worse, the doors of the empty room started opening on their own, one by one, and out came all of the 5 people I saw at the bar. They were all laughing at me to the point I passed out. Then I heard silence. Then I woke up and realized that I was in a hospital. I asked one of the nurses what was going on. She told me that a group of teenagers saw me walking out of the forest and then walking to the abandoned house. They tried calling out to me, but I didn't respond nor look at them. Then the group saw me entering the house, and when they tried to open the door, it was locked. And so they called 911 thinking that I was trapped in that house. 30 minutes later, the police staff arrived and broke open the door and found me unconscious lying on the floor. They brought me into the hospital and were trying to investigate what had happened in that abandoned house. Later, I told police officers the whole story when they came to ask, but they didn't seem to believe me. While some of them were laughing, thinking that I was making it up. After that, I went home and directly went to sleep. The next morning, I hurried to the bathroom because I had to vomit very badly. And after I did, I noticed that my vomit was black. To forget things, I tried taking a cold shower. And when I was showering, I felt a sharp sting on my back. Then, when I changed the water temperature from cold to warm, the sting started to feel even more painful. I turned back with my head, barely making it to see behind. Then I was shocked for life. I had the same satanic pentagram carved on my back, which was surely done by a sharp object. From then on, I never went to a bar again.
My name is Luca, and I live in Germany. This happened when I was 17 years old. I was babysitting my mother's friend's baby. It was bedtime for the baby, so I took him to bed and went back down the stairs to watch some TV. At some point, the baby suddenly started crying. I got up and went to the bedroom to check what is wrong with him. The window was open. I knew it was shut earlier before. That freaked me out, and to be honest, I was scared. But there was nothing I could do, so I shut the door immediately, took care of the baby, and put him back to sleep. When I walked out of the room, I realized that in the corner there was a clown sitting on the floor. The whole floor was kind of dark. I couldn't see very clearly, but he looked like he had a smile on his face as he was staring at me. But it just looked like a toy, so I didn't really think about it anymore. I just went back to watching TV. Only 10 to 15 minutes later, the baby started crying again. I went upstairs and went into the bedroom again, feeling anxious. And when I saw that the window was open again, my heart dropped. My entire body was sweating. I tried to calm down the crying baby. I wanted to call my mom so badly, but I left my phone on the couch. When I went back to the bedroom door, I screamed at the top of my lungs. The clown that was sitting on the ground in the corner of the room earlier was now gone. I was horrified. My entire body was all nerves. Then I heard footsteps. Constantly, but unequal and odd jumping steps. I thought I heard a creepy giggling sound too. But that doesn't matter. I was almost out of my mind. I ran as fast as I could to grab my phone and call the police. Speaking gibberish, I told them that a clown broke into the house where I was babysitting. The cops arrived 10 minutes later and checked the whole house, but they didn't find the clown. They called my mom and told her everything, and a few hours later, she came back with her friend. To this day, I still don't know if they found him, but hopefully they did. I cannot get a minute of sleep when thinking about that night.
When I was in the 11th grade, some friends and I used to be in an elementary school together that had recently shut down. When we heard the school shut down, we all decided to check out our neighborhood school. This idea got my friends and I very excited. We agreed to show up at the school around 11:30 p.m. The night we chose to do this was ironically raining heavily with the occasional sounds of thunder, which made it a bit more unsettling. Our meeting spot was the playground, which all of us showed up at. Now we just had to find a way into the school. After searching around the property, one of my friends found an unlocked window that led to the main office. All of us climbed inside the school from the unlocked window. Getting inside that school was a little unnerving. It was very dark in there, and you could barely see where you were going. But some of my friends had a couple of flashlights, so we were fine. The main office was trashed. There were papers everywhere, with broken printers and other pieces of technology scattered around the room. Every time one of my friends would flash his light into a new direction of the office, I was afraid the light would land on a person or something even worse. The main office led to the main part of the school. In the main part of the school, it had a hallway to the left of you and a hallway to the right of you, and straight ahead from the office was the library. Trying to get into the library didn't work. The door was locked. So we decided to go down the hallway to the left of us. Flashing that light down the dark, far, quiet hallway startled me. While walking down the hallway, we all suddenly stopped in our tracks looking at what we just saw. At the end of the hall, we saw a very tall figure that appeared to be a woman. She had long blonde hair and she wore a torn-up, dirty wedding dress. We were about 10 feet away from her. But when the flashlight landed on the woman, she quickly ran into a classroom. It was very odd. My friends and I were very afraid. Why was this woman with a wedding dress standing there in this abandoned school, just staring at us? We just stood there waiting for anything to happen. Standing in that very dark hallway for 3 minutes felt like 20. Ring! Suddenly, the school fire bells went off, making us sprint as fast as we could back to that main office window. As we were running, the lights aggressively flickered, making it harder to see. It was like someone was flicking the light switch as fast as they possibly could, making the lights abruptly switch on and off. It terrified us. Then we rushed into the main office. When we were in there, one of my friends yelled, "Oh, shit!" I looked to see what he was looking at, and what I saw made me lose it. Behind us in the main office was the same woman. She was now closer. Her hair covered her eyes, but that wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was her mouth. This woman's mouth was unnaturally wide. It would be impossible for any human to open their mouth as wide as this woman's mouth. She was still staring at us, but with a creepy giggling. All of us screamed when we saw this disturbing woman. We got out of that window so fast and made it outside. By the time we got outside, someone already had called the cops because of the fire bell, and my friends and I were caught. We told the cops there was someone else in the school and to go get them. 6 cops entered the school looking for the woman that we encountered. After about 30 minutes, the cops came out of the building looking unsettled. And while I was in the car, I could hear the 6 cops that entered the building telling the other cops that there was very unusual activity in that school. 15 minutes later, we were escorted home by the police. My friends and I were all grounded for a long time. But we didn't tell our parents or anyone about the woman we saw. I still remember exactly how that woman looked. Her face, her hair, her wedding dress, and that disturbing mouth I can't even describe.
One day, I got a call from a few friends of mine about going to the mall. It was a stressful week at work, so I thought some retail therapy would definitely help. We ended up shopping for a few hours, so we decided that hitting the food court would be the spot. I gave the girls my order, and I told them I would come back and find them as I needed them after I used the restroom. The restrooms are at the end of the large and wide corridor. They were your typical mall type with lots of stalls. Anyway, so I sat down to use the bathroom, and I could see from the gap on the floor between the wall of the stall and the floor, lots of movement from someone's shadow. I wasn't sure if they were getting changed or not, so I didn't pay attention at first, but it felt like the shadow was coming from above at some points. You know, as if the light above was being obstructed by something. After maybe the third time, I decided to look up, and I could see a phone and parts of a guy's arm leaning over. Someone was taking photos of me. I instantly shouted out, "What are you doing, you pervert?" And in a moment of sheer shock and disbelief, this all very quickly turned into fear as I got up and leaped out of the stall and was greeted by an empty bathroom. Not one person was in sight, and from the quick glance of the mirrors opposite, there was only one stall shut, and it was the one next to me. I ran for the restroom exit, but it was locked. Luckily, it had a twist lock, and I could turn it as I did. I heard the stall open from behind me. I got out immediately and turned as I exited and noticed a sign on the door saying, "Closed for maintenance." This sign was not here when I went in. I screamed some more, shouting to get anyone's attention as I ran down the corridor toward the food hall, and had obviously caught the attention of a few people. A group of 3 guys stopped me and clearly could see the panic in my eyes. They asked me questions and I explained. 2 guys ran toward the ladies' restroom, and one to find security. Security arrived within seconds. After a while, a rather large crowd had gathered due to the commotion, and although I was in the comfort of my friends, security, and now the police, I never felt so alone. Security and police, nor 2 guys found anyone. There was a few staff only, and fire exit doors opened down the corridor, so plenty of escape routes for whoever this guy was. I gave my statements down at the station later that day once my parents showed up. The police said they had security tapes from the cameras that point down the corridor and will keep us updated with any news. Hopefully, they find this guy.
When I was a kid, I was really into paranormal things such as ghosts and spirits, so I always got really excited for Halloween. On one Halloween, my parents took me and my brother to a ghost tour in the city. During the tour, we would visit real haunted houses, which were said to have some really violent ghosts. I couldn't be more excited. We arrived at the location for the tour meetup, an empty parking lot, but we were a bit early and nobody else had arrived yet. It was a chilly October night, so my parents decided that we should find a building to wait in until more people arrive. We walked over to the building that the parking lot was meant for, an old hotel, and entered the vestibule. We tried to fully enter the building, but we found that the doors leading to the lobby inside were locked. After a few minutes of standing around, I started to feel strange. A nauseous feeling had swept my stomach. Goosebumps ran up and down my arms, and a piercing feeling of being watched was stabbing, almost burning my back. Looking around, it was obvious that me and my family were the only ones inside the vestibule. The lobby of the building was also devoid of people. Once we saw people enter the parking lot, we left, and I felt better. And after that, I was shocked to see the first place we stopped on the tour was the building my family had been waiting in. Now, this building we won't enter, because the spirit inside here is more violent than the others will encounter, the guide stated. In here, we have the Shadow Man. He doesn't terrorize the whole building, just the area that you enter through. He's been known to slap and scratch people coming inside. A few pictures were passed around. All of a sudden, I don't know how and why, but I recognized that an inky black figure stood against the door's windows. Its eyes were glowing white, and it had long fingers and pointed nails. It was freaky to think that I might have been targeted by the Shadow Man, but I didn't think much of it until after the tour when my family went back home. I started to complain to my mom that my back was itching and burning, so she grabbed some ointment and told me she would look at it. We thought it was just a bug bite. We had been walking around outside at night after all. When she lifted my shirt, she asked when I had scratched my back. I told her I hadn't. She took a picture on her phone and showed it to me. I was met with a long red scratch leading from my shoulder to the middle of my back. The skin on my back was a shade of red, like a rash. Me and all of my family couldn't say anything, but just turned back straight to our house. The Shadow Man had got me.
This is not about my story, but someone from my church, and he wanted to share his experience with anyone else. He's a 32-year-old man, and his pseudonym is Mark. He's a fairly big guy, and this situation took place when he was on his way home from work. He said that he had lost his phone 1 week before this whole situation happened, so he couldn't call and get any help during the story. It was quite late, around 11 p.m. He had finished work and was walking to a taxi stop location, and when he got there, a few people were standing around waiting as well. After about 2 minutes, he noticed that there was a minivan approaching. Usually, minivans are cheaper than taxis, and he felt tired that day, so he decided to take the minivan. He sat on a seat, and there was a young boy seated in the passenger side next to the driver who was collecting the fare. And then, 2 other boys who looked like teenagers also boarded the minivan and sat in the seats in front of him. Once the minivan took off, after about 5 minutes, the boy asked if they would like to drink some Coke. The boys accepted and started drinking. And they also gave it to Mark. Mark was also feeling thirsty, so he took it, but only a sip. Not much later, he started feeling drowsy. Just before he about laid his head on the seat beside him, he noticed that those 2 boys were already knocked out. After he laid his head down, he heard noises coming from the back seats. 2 people were talking in a different language. The car was passing a big signboard that showed Crest Chicken Farm. And then he finally passed out. When he got up, he found himself inside a big shed-like barn, and there were some tools on a big table. He was on the floor, and the other 2 teenage boys were laying next to him. He still felt a bit drowsy, but he managed to get himself up as he was looking for an escape. He saw that the 2 boys were still passed out, so he tried waking them, but they wouldn't budge. As Mark was kind of a big man, he tried to see if he could carry one of them, but it was hard to do because even Mark was having a hard time to stand properly. And then he heard voices. He took a peek from the door, and 3 people were walking toward the big shed, coming from a house on the hill, which was quite close to the shed. Mark panicked and tried to look for another exit. He was looking around the place, and he found one at the end of the shed, luckily. He approached quietly and escaped as fast as he could. At this point, his vision was all blurry, but he managed to find a fence door and unlocked it. He heard the people shouting, but he ignored. He just kept on running. When he finally reached his house, it was early morning, around 5 a.m. His wife was up all night waiting for him and ran out the front door as soon as she saw him. He collapsed and slept for almost the whole day. When he woke up and finally got a chance to explain to his wife what had transpired that night, he remembered about the other 2 boys who were still there. Then he contacted the police immediately. He told the police about the road signs and a big billboard for Crest Chicken Farm and other things that he could remember. About 2 weeks after, there was a police report about how they found 2 teenage boys' bodies in a lake and advised that when they examined the bodies, all their organs were missing. Mark just stood in fear, and as the event was too traumatic for him, Mark had to quit a job for a while. This happened when it was our school's camping day. All the grades went to each other's places, and our teacher had taken the 6 students to this large site that was quite cheap. It started off all right. I got a room with some of my friends at the time, and my closer friends were in the next room. The first incident started when I was the only one in my room, still packing mine and the other people's stuff away. I was on the bottom bunk, letting my mate take the top. When I looked up was some sentence, and it said, "Hello, you are going next," with a creepy smile. On the second day, we all went outside. There were teepee tents next to a field. I hung out in one with one of my friends. Some others hung out in a second tent, but in the third tent, I saw a shadow with a knife. I told the teacher and another student, who went in, but didn't come out. But nobody believed me, and there was nobody inside the tent. I thought something was really weird. On the third day, 3 of my roommates were out on a day trip with some others, which I was going to do the next day. I had done a mud course, and after that, I decided to have a shower. The water was black and disgusting, which added to this horrible week. All of a sudden, when I was still in the shower booth, the doorknob was shaking. I screamed, and when I got out, I saw a handwriting, "You won't leave alive," on the wall. Then I saw a shadow in the window. My room's door was locked while I was having a shower, so no one could enter in our room. The fourth day, I was taking a walk someplace that no one knew, and then I found a huge knife and blood-soaked clothes. I just hoped that this stupid and terrible camp would finish soon. Then the last night, I woke up in the middle of the night because I saw the same shadow leaving my room. And there was a knife on the floor, again. I couldn't sleep the rest of that night. The last day, I was left to clean the room and set the beds for the students, whoever would use it next. When I was about to finish, I saw the door and it said, "You are lucky you survived. I didn't have enough time, but next, I will not let you go." I panicked, so I ran from that creepy room. I told my teacher. However, by the time we got back, it was gone. As I got onto the bus, I looked in the window of that room, and the shadow stared back at me, with a decapitated head in one hand, and in the other hand, the same knife I had seen twice. Later, when I came back from the camp, I heard about that place. It was an orphanage and a mental institution that had many mysterious deaths. To this day, I wondered what would have happened if I'd spent longer than 5 days at that place.
This happened pretty recent, about 3 weeks ago. Myself and 3 friends were hanging out at a shopping center one evening. We were messing around posting clips on TikTok. Then one of my friends started laughing, and I asked her what she was laughing at. She told me that guy behind us kept staring at me. When I turned around, it was some older guy just watching me. He had black sunglasses, a cap, an old Adidas tracksuit with scuffed up shoes, and had a disgusting looking beard. My friends thought it was hilarious, but I found it really weird. Then another one of my friends said, she thinks that guy lives on her street, about a few houses down from her. She said that he actually follows her on TikTok. At that point, I quickly got my phone out to check if he was following me, and he was. I had to block him because he seemed a bit creepy. We went to get McDonald's before we went home, and I received a message on TikTok from someone. It was that guy who had been following us. His name was Greg, and he wrote, "Why did you block me?" with 2 emojis. One was a crying face, and the other one was an angry face. He had actually created another account that day in the shopping center. I blocked that account as well, hoping that would be the end of it. I didn't mention it to my friends this time, knowing they would just laugh. That night, I was up late and had Netflix on in the background as I was chatting with my friends on Facebook while scrolling through TikTok. I got up to use the bathroom, and when I returned, I had 3 messages from my friends, all saying the same thing. All were things like, "Who's in your room?" and "What's up with your last post?" I asked them what they were talking about, and they told me to check my TikTok, so I did. It was a clip of my bedroom. It was a clip of someone picking up my phone and recording the inside of my room. At that point, I heard a creaking. Then I heard a man's voice say, "Sorry. Please don't scream." And turned to see my closet door slightly open. I started to scream when the same guy who had been following us burst out of my closet and tried to cover my mouth. Thank God I screamed and it was enough for my parents to hear. They came upstairs and my dad tackled the guy to the floor. The police were called and he was arrested. We were informed that the guy had straight up admitted to stalking and breaking and entering. One of my friends pointed out, if I go back and look at the post on TikTok from when we were in the shopping center, you can see Greg is in almost all of those pictures, somewhere in the background. I haven't heard what's going to happen to Greg yet, but I just hope he won't ever come near us again.
When I was in my last year of college, I started going to frat parties more often. I remember where they would have the frat parties at. It was at some creepy abandoned lake. There was one cabin around the lake, and it was big enough for parties. And that night, me and my friend Kai were walking to the lake for the party. When we got there, I saw a beautiful young girl. She had blonde hair with pretty blue eyes. Kai noticed that I was staring at her, and of course, he made a dumb joke. I told him to shut up, and he chuckled. And then he said, "Go talk to her, dude." I refused at first, but after 5 minutes, Kai convinced me to go over to her. So I finally went for it. I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, are you new around here?" She then said, "Yeah, it's my first year of college," and smiled. Then she told me that her name was Jamie. We started talking, and about 1 hour later, we decided to go into the woods. As soon as we were far enough away from the party, she looked at me and we started kissing. Well, to tell the truth, it was the best moment ever of my life. After about 20 minutes of making out, she said, "Let's go back to the party." But after walking for 5 miles, I heard something. And suddenly, I realized that Jamie was with me no more. She was gone while I was not paying attention to her. I called her name, but there was no answer. Then I heard a strange sound again on my left side. I went to investigate, and I froze in fear. It was a man in his late 50s, tied up to a tree. He had tape on his mouth, and he was beaten up badly. So I untied him, took the tape off, and I asked him, "Are you okay, sir?" The man said he was okay, and I asked again, "Who did this to him?" And his answer terrified me. He replied that it was the girl with blonde hair, with blue eyes. As soon as he said it, I heard rustling noises coming from behind me. I turned around. Jamie was there, and she had an axe in her hand. She was smiling again, but now it became madness. I tried talking to Jamie and told her to put the axe down, but she didn't listen. She threw the axe right at me. Luckily, the axe missed me and hit a log beside me. I had no choice at all. I tackled her to the ground and screamed for help. Kai and 2 other dudes came to me in a hurry and helped to restrain her. I was pissed and also shocked. I asked her, why did she attack that man? She laughed and told me, "What's the problem? You don't have to worry about it." Something like that. I told Kai to watch her while I called the cops, and the cops showed up within minutes. The party was canceled, and everyone had to go back to campus. I still think what would have happened if I didn't pay attention to the sounds and just kept walking to the party. I hope Jamie never finds me again.
A few years ago, more like 10 years ago, I used to be big into visiting weird websites. I had a lot of time on my hand due to not playing sports, nor did I volunteer for anything at all in high school. I told my friend Mark that I was starting to get bored. Honestly, I was bored with what I was experiencing on these websites. He said I should go on the deep web. He and I used to go on the deep web, but never found anything. So I decided to search through some more stuff, a little deeper. I searched for hours every day for about 2.5 months. Still nothing that I hadn't seen already. I told Mark, and of course he said just visit the dark web. When I did go on the dark web, I saw chat rooms, all with different names. I came across one named I, as in EYE. It was all in caps. I entered the chat, but before entering the live chat, you are assigned a number. Mine was P34. I confirmed my number and entered. There were hundreds of people. The comments were coming in quick. At first, I didn't understand what was going on. The screen was black, then a name popped up on the screen that said Mr. Wiggles. The comments immediately stopped and a voice came over my speakers.
Welcome, P34.
Then his name disappeared off of the screen and the comments continued, everyone giving me welcomes. A few minutes go by, then a countdown from 10 pops up on the screen. Then the chat goes crazy. Once it reached the number 1, the screen went straight to what looks like a view from a camera just watching someone in what looks like their home. I sat there watching this for 20 minutes and nothing happened, so I shut down my computer. The next day I went to school, had a normal day, went to Walmart, then I went home. I decided to go back on the same chat from before. I confirmed my number P34 and again, there were hundreds of people commenting. Mr. Wiggles popped up and just like before, the comments stopped. Across the screen it said, no new members tonight. Then the countdown started again. Everyone in the chat started going wild. The countdown finished and then it was showing the point of view from a camera again. But it was outside of a school. My school from earlier that day. At that point I was intrigued. I couldn't tell if it was focused on a certain person or just watching the school. After 30 minutes of watching the video, our school bell rang and everyone started to come outside while whoever was recording was positioned across the street in the car. Once everyone came out, the person got out the car and started to follow a crowd of kids. Everyone started to split from each other and the person recording started to follow someone. It was my friend Mark. He had to be at least 100 feet behind him. I started to call Mark, but he didn't answer. I kept calling him as I watched the video, but nothing. The person followed him to his house and sat outside of his house for a few minutes. The man behind the camera finally said,
No parents are home.
And he began to walk to Mark's house, rang the doorbell, and waited as he continued to record. A few seconds go by, and Mark opened the door. He looked confused and the guy said,
P34 sent me.
And Mark looked afraid that the camera shut off and everyone in the chat left. So I did too. I called Mark's house phone instead of his cell phone, and his mother answered. I asked for Mark and she said that she thought he was with me. I panicked. I then received a notification on my phone from my Gmail account. It said the sender was Mr. Wiggles. The message was, I'm getting closer, P34. Mark says hi. I was shocked and didn't know what to do, so I called the cops. They didn't do anything about it because the email disappeared. I haven't been on the dark web since and no one has seen Mark. Still to this day, I receive messages with pictures of me in random places, along with the same written message that said, it can happen anytime. I honestly wish I never went on the dark web.
I recently moved out to attend university in a different town, so I rented a flat where I live alone. Every morning, I took my bicycle, which I keep in the basement of my building, and went to my lectures. Usually, the neighborhood is quiet, but one night around 1 o'clock a.m., my door phone rang. This was unusual, but I brushed it off as a mistake from someone who got drunk. It rang again, but I kept ignoring it. This happened at least 3 different times, so it began to annoy me. One day, I returned from my lecture and found a bus ticket placed on my door handle. This ticket was from a bus in my hometown, and it appeared to be mine, as the bus number on it was the bus that I frequently used. At this moment, I started to get concerned that someone was pranking me. That same night, I kept my front window a bit open to keep an eye on the entrance. I live on the 2nd floor, so it's too high for anyone to climb. I shut the lights and waited. And at that moment, the door phone rang again. This time, I checked through the window and there was a shadowy figure of a man. He waited for about 5 minutes and then left. I considered calling the police, but I had nothing to report besides a strange man ringing my door phone late at night, so I soon ignored it. But what happened some days after almost made me go crazy. It was around 3 a.m., and the door phone rang again. By this time, though, I heard the front door shut. Someone must have forgotten to lock it, so I assumed that the man was now inside the building. Terrified, I went to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I had. Then I stood behind the front door and waited. The doorbell rang. I think my stomach dropped at that point. He rang again and then knocked strongly. I stayed frozen for an eternity until I couldn't hear anything. I was relieved and went to sleep after a while, which in hindsight was very stupid, as I should have made sure that the man had left the building. The following morning, as I was leaving for my lecture, I noticed some scratches near the front door's handle, as if someone had tried to mess with the lock. I immediately went to my landlord, who lives right above me, and explained everything that had been going on. He reassured me that everything would be fine. So I went to get my bike. But as I walked towards the basement door, I noticed that the lock was broken. I finally understood. The man from last night must have hidden in there. I hadn't heard the front door shut again yesterday, so that must have meant that the man was still here. I ran upstairs again and told my landlord. He got angry, grabbed a bat, and went to check. All I could hear was struggling noises as my landlord beat that man senseless. We then called the police, who arrived a few moments later and arrested him. I still remember his face to this day, as he looked straight at me silently. It turned out that this man had been following me for days and was trying to rob my house. He had done the same thing to other people in the past. I don't know what happened to him afterwards, but I assume he is in prison. I am forever grateful to my landlord for being so brave. We replaced the locks on every door, so now I feel safer. Well, I would have forgotten about this if I didn't open my mailbox recently and find another bus ticket.
My name is Chad, and this story took place when I was about 12. I was at home with my mom since my dad was going to be out all night. 3 of my best friends came to my house for a sleepover party. We sat in my room playing PlayStation and watching TV. Soon, we noticed it was getting pretty dark outside. Mom ordered pizza for dinner, so when the doorbell rang, we knew that the pizza had arrived. When my mom opened the door, my friends and I were just right next to her because we were pretty hungry at that time. So we waited for her to take her money out and pay for it. The pizza delivery guy seemed like he was in his mid-50s and looked pretty old. While my mother was taking her money out, he looked at us, and all of a sudden, a creepy grin appeared on his face, and his eyes were wide open. It was kind of weird, but we just laughed it off as we didn't think much of it. My mom handed him the money, the pizza guy gave us the pizza, and then left. We took the pizza into my room and watched Netflix while we were eating it. A few hours passed, and my mom came up to our room and said, "It's time for you guys to go to bed. If you need anything, just let me know." My friends brought sleeping bags from their home, so we all got ready to go to bed and lied down. I turned the lights off and went into my bed. We talked to each other for about 45 minutes until it was around 11:45, close to midnight, and we eventually got tired of it. We closed our eyes, not saying a word to one another. Later that night, I heard rustling coming from the backyard. It sounded like someone was walking on a pile of leaves. At first, I thought it was a cat walking around looking for food, as they usually do. However, the next thing I heard was a loud thump. It sounded a lot closer, and like it was hitting my wall. At that time, we already all got up from our spot and heard it. We were so scared to look outside through the window and check what was going on. And then, we saw a hand on the window, lifting it up much higher. We all screamed with fear, and the guy still tried to crawl in. But one of my friends thought much faster. He locked the window, and we all ran out of my room. Then, our house security alarm started going off like crazy. My mom, who was sleeping in her bedroom, came out, turned it off, and asked what was going on. We explained what just happened and looked at the cameras, which were set up outside of our house. There was a guy quietly trying to come down a ladder. I realized the thump on the wall we heard was a ladder. Mom quickly got out her phone and called the police. We locked all of the doors and came back to the monitors to look at the cameras. And we saw the man opened our backyard shed and hid in there. In just a few minutes, the police were already arrived. 3 officers went outside searching for the man while we gave information to the other officer. We told him that we saw the man going into the shed out in our backyard. One of the police was holding a gun, and the other 2 were approaching closer to the shed. In the blink of an eye, they had entered the shed, found him in the shed hiding, put him in handcuffs to arrest him. They brought him out front and put him in the back of a police car. That time, lots of people heard the noise, came outside to see what was going on. And surprisingly, the cops found some things like a knife, hammer, and others from his pocket. As he was in the back seat of the car, he looked at us and gave us a creepy grin with wide eyes. At first, I couldn't see his face clearly, but when I concentrated on focusing it more visibly, I was shocked. It was the pizza delivery guy. After that, the police handled the situation, so we could go back to sleep again that night. I don't know what this guy would have done to us if he had successfully got inside.
This happened to me at the beginning of this year, just after I lost my husband to meningitis. I had moved in with my father and taken a job at a local hotel. It was a nice, cushy job that wasn't very stressful, and it was also nice to me in my grief-stricken